But Jessica, I thought we would start off with, you may know some people, you may not know everyone. So I thought we would start with everybody kind of talking, saying who they are and then what their role is when the project, and then we can take questions from there. And Roxanne, I was hoping you would.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you, Jessica. My name is Roxanne Wilson, and I am the Homeless Services Director for the County of Monterey. And I think Robert Ratner is the next one.
Jessica and I know each other well. Hi, Jessica. Good to see you.
And Rene.
Hi, Jessica. Rene Mendez, City Manager here in Watsonville.
And Mark Strudley.
Hey, Jessica. Good to see you again. Mark Strudley, Executive Director of the Pajaro Regional Flood Management Agency.
Hi, all. Thanks.
Thanks. So as you probably heard by now, all 4 of our different agencies have been working together for going on a year now. Oh, I see Pam is joining. Fantastic. I'll wait. Hi, Pam.
Hi,
Nice to see you again.
good to see you. I'm glad that you're doing this.
Thank you so much. We just went through introductions, but we'll go through it. Do you know everyone on the call, or should we run through it real quick?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So
So we just got started. You didn't miss anything.
Oh, okay.
We're good.
so about a year ago, Dr. Ratner, Rene, and I had started meeting because we have a shared population that is living along the Pajaro River. And at that time, it was Water Resources Agency from Monterey County, and Mark Strudley was at the Santa Cruz County District.
Yeah, flood control district.
Thank you. I can never remember. But every single year, as you guys are probably aware, both counties have to prepare for any flooding that could happen. So historically, the people who are living along the river has been removed. And we knew that there had to be a better way. So we started talking and really identifying what our collective goals were going to be. And we had sent out an outreach team that the County of Monterey funds called Community Health Engagement to go and interview all of the folks that are staying along the river and asking them essentially, how can we help you? What will it take for us to get you to permanently move out of the river? Simultaneously, I was hearing that Pajaro Regional Flood Management Agency became a JPA, and they were in charge of the new $400 million expansion project that is now being expedited. So all of this started lining up pretty quickly for all of our different agencies. And during that time, we had learned from the people who were staying inside of or along the encampment, along the riverbed, excuse me, that what they were seeking were actually fairly simple things. They were asking for assistance with their with their mental health. There are many people who had identified as having substance use disorder. There are people who needed help with jobs, citizenship assistance, and more than anything, they just wanted some privacy and they wanted to be treated with dignity and respect. Well, all of that seems like it's programmable, right? So we worked with the outreach teams along with the folks on this call, and we had developed a project proposal that we submitted to the state of California. February? Robert, was it February when we? Yeah. So lo and behold, 1 month later, the levee breached and our worst nightmare happened. And we have been working very diligently trying to assist these folks. However, as the water started to recede, many people have returned. And we're very excited to hear that the state of California heard that this particular project would serve the needs of 3 different government jurisdictions, along with preparing the expansion, preparing for the expansion project. So if all else goes, if everything goes well, we do plan on opening about 34 tiny prefabricated units by the end of this year. And I am going to stop and see if Dr. Ratner or any of my colleagues really has anything to add.
Sure, I can go next. Robert Ratner, County of Santa Cruz, Human Services Department, Director of our Housing for Health Division. And I was just really excited to be a part of this conversation and deeply appreciated that Roxanne initiated it because people living without housing don't follow our strict borders. As you can see, we have 4 different government agencies on the call. I represent Santa Cruz County, Rene's with City of Watsonville, Mark's with the Regional Flood Management Agency, and Roxanne's with another county. And we all experienced the same challenges, well, similar challenges of how do we help people who are living without housing, who are crossing borders and boundaries, and just the excitement of us coming together to say, hey, let's figure out how to put an application together where we're all collaborating and all kind of working in our best areas to come up with a plan that's going to make a difference. So I'm excited on behalf of Santa Cruz County, because I think within the southern part of the county, we really could use more of a shelter setting like the one that's proposed in this application, where there's private accommodations, ability for people to bring in belongings and pets and partners, and to bring in some of the outreach expertise that's been around the levee, more on the Monterey County side historically. And many of the people who are unhoused in Watsonville have expressed similar things to the folks who are on the Monterey County side of the river. We want more privacy, dignity, respect, kind of shelter where we feel welcomed, and that helps us move forward with our life. And our role is to partner with everybody in this process, and we have some housing assistance funds. So when folks accept this shelter or navigation center, as I'm calling it, low barrier shelter with lots of services to help people get into housing, we have some funds that will be able to help people get into housing with security deposits, move-in expenses. We've got some healthcare services we're planning to link up with the site. And then long-term, another quasi-governmental agency, the Central California Alliance for Health, which is the Medi-Cal managed care plan for both of our counties. We anticipate they're going to have a role in helping fund services and helping to keep this project going over the long run. So I think when we're talking about a complex issue like homelessness, we need to have more of this cross-jurisdictional collaboration with people that are willing to reach out and talk through challenging things and figure out how to get things accomplished together. And so I'm really excited to be a part of this. Can't wait for getting the project up and running, and happy to answer questions from you all. Turn over to Rene.
Yeah, let's go to Rene next. Run through
Yeah.
everybody, then open for questions.
Yeah, thanks. I think similar to us is working collaboratively with both counties, since obviously the city we're next to the Pajaro River and same population. I think both Robert and Roxanne have really shared that, articulated, and it's a challenging problem, and no jurisdiction, whether county or city, can address it by themselves individually, or in this case, even the Pajaro River Flood Management Agency. And I think recognizing that, and I think the challenges as we move to and develop these projects, right, is all the other location, where they belong, kind of what does it mean to communities from a funding perspective up front and long term, and really, I think just working all together. There is no clear path. There's no right answer. I think I've been educated on that quite a bit in the last year from both Roxanne and Robert. And how do we partner? And, what is the city's role? As you know, some of the funding sources are really, you have to know what you're doing. You have to have the right people to be able to maximize the funding sources. And that's just something that cities typically are not engaged in. But in this case, I think it's a real, I'm excited to move forward. I'm excited to continue to work with both counties and PERFMA on sort of next steps in the project, and just go through the steps that we have to go through. And I think finding a partner, local partner as well, community partner is also key. As I'm sure you followed in other jurisdictions, these types of projects are not easy to do, just because of the challenge of the population. But I also think a well-managed facility is significant. It's very important. So I'm excited to next steps. I mean, I think, we were we were very pleasantly surprised when the funding came down, and it's kind of like, okay, now we have to go. And how do we engage everybody? So I have to engage our council, the community and everything, just kind of move forward on the next steps.
And then Mark, would you
Mark?
wrap us up on
Sure.
where you fit in on all of this?
Yeah, so, there are flood control agencies across the country that are struggling with figuring out how to manage unhoused populations that are interacting with their facilities. And the bottom line for the Pajaro River is we want to be in a position at our agency, not just in moving populations out of harm's way episodically. We want to be a part of a more permanent and helpful solution for the unhoused populations that are right now living in the river. So we have requirements to perform maintenance in the river system and with the levee system, which often disrupts these populations' ability to have a stable environment in which to live. We don't like doing that, but it's just part of our operational program. And we, of course, can't be operating machinery around where people are. And so we do have to move them from time to time. And when we get into the winter season, of course, it's not safe for them to be there. And as we saw with this last winter, the Pajaro can become quite aggressive as a river system, and it's certainly not at all safe for these populations to be living within the river system. And so because we don't have the funding source nor the expertise really to understand how to best be helpful in this situation, Roxanne thankfully reached out at a time when we were ready to reach out to both counties and try to figure out how we can collaborate on a more permanent and helpful solution. And we wanted to be a part of that solution. And so thanks to Roxanne and Robert and all their expertise and leadership with this grant program, we were able to join forces, and we're very happy to be a part of that and to be a part of a very solutions-oriented approach to this rather than an episodic treatment that we have to deal with over and over and over again.
Thank you, Mark. So from here, so this is kind of that broad overview. So now's a chance for you, Pam and Jessica, to, we're just going to be more relaxed, to just, ask questions, whatever you need to know.
Have you not identified an exact location? It sounds a little tentative, referencing a church that may be interested in renting out their property.
I think that, I'll take a stab at that. I think that there is the location, and we just, from a city, we just have to work and go through our processes to get it done, and permitting, work, community development, all the things that we need to do. So I just want to be a little cautious, but we just have to still just go through the steps, which we haven't done. And part of that was a conscious sort of decision on, let's see if we have some traction here before we engage in sort of the next steps, because as you know, these things are challenging wherever you put them. And so that's why I'm, at least from a city perspective, I'm just being a little cautious and saying we still have to go through the developer still has to work community development and the hookups and the permits and all that. None of that's been done.
Can you say where it is though?
I want to be cautious. So, but I think what's out there already is I'm just going to say it. It's Presbyterian Church on Riverside. They've expressed an interest in working. But I also want to be cautious because they're not part of this conversation as well. Just fully transparent. But I know it's out there. So that's one of that they've expressed a real interest. They've been helping provide resources to a lot of the population for a number of years. So to them, it would seem like, okay, maybe there's a role for them here.
The state press release said that an estimated 70 people could be helped, but your press release said 34 homes. I'm just trying to figure out what the number we're looking at is.
So it is, we do anticipate that 70 folks, maybe even more, hopefully more, can be served. It's not a permanent supportive housing project. It is a housing navigation center. The funding will take, we have until 2026 for us to fully expend all of the funding. So over those 2 years after the units are built, we do believe that at minimum 70 people would be served.
sorry I have a ton of questions. For the cubes, are you looking, I looked on their website and they have different models, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, with bathroom, without bathroom. Do you have an idea which type you'll use?
Yeah, so the initial plans that we looked at was doing the 64 square foot cubes without the en-suites. There will be a bathroom unit, a shower unit, and a area for communal eating, and also a pet run. So that was a big thing, as Robert had mentioned. Partners, pets, and property is a big deal. So we will also be having a location for people to store their belongings that can't fit inside of their units as well.
And office space for services too. there.
And oh yes, very important.
I was curious as to why tiny homes and how tiny are we talking?
They're pretty small, Pam. The reason why we decided to go this route is because one of the things that we know and hear often is that a lot of folks in congregate shelters are sometimes triggered. This is not everybody. This is a certain population. Sometimes they are triggered from staying in there, especially people with mental illness, or staying with people with mental illness that may trigger their own responses. So one of the things that one of the consistent messages that we heard during that interview process with the people living on the river is, if we want them to participate, they are asking that it would be non-congregate. So really, this entire project was essentially co-created with the people who are living along the river.
But are we talking under 500 square feet, or like?
Yes, they're like 64 square feet.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is.
I'll put a link inside of the chat for you to look at the cubes.
And so how long will people?
I got it, Roxanne. Oh, you did it. Okay.
How long will people typically stay there?
So with housing navigation centers, unlike transitional housing, there's not an actual set expectation. I mean, ultimately, I would say we are hoping that people would be out between 6 to 9 months. Some people may take longer, and that's okay. I often think about how long it took for me to get my life together. So, you know, some people are on different tracks, and I think that that's one of the things that we all understand is these one-size-fits-all interventions is really not going to fit all. So housing navigation centers in general are more successful when you give people the amount of time that they need, and all of the services to wrap around them to stabilize. So it is like housing navigation centers are essentially emergency shelters, rapid rehousing rapid rehousing, and in-depth wraparound services all put together, right? So I think that that's the big thing, is the service provision that will be provided to this population.
Hey, Roxanne, could you draw some analogies to the Share Center? And then maybe a little bit, it reminds me of the VTC program that we've got in Marina. Are there kind of descriptions that might kind of paint a picture of what will happen there?
Yeah, so I want to be conscious that we do have some Santa Cruz folks on here, but we, Monterey County partnered with the city of Salinas many years ago, got into an MOU for us to open up a shared navigation center. When the Homeless Emergency Aid Program came down under Governor Brown's administration, the Continuum of Care received that funding, and they had invested almost $7 million into building what is now known as the Share Center. So the Share Center is a housing navigation center. It houses up to, I think, 125 people, families, unaccompanied adults, everybody's in there. It is semi-non-congregate, what the Share Center is. They do have walls between beds, but the walls only go up, I think, maybe 6-8 feet. But they do have communal eating spaces and all of that. The Share Center is, I would say, the flagship of Monterey County because of the level of partners that it took for us to pull off, right? So it was a nonprofit COC, the county and the city partnering together to make it work. That particular project averages an 80% positive exit destination rate. And really, we do want to attribute it to the fact that the organization that runs it is truly housing first. Housing first, in my opinion, is literally the only way that we're going to start seeing changes on the streets. We can't demand that people fix their life in order to earn housing. That's ridiculous. But that project, in comparison to the project that we have at the Veterans Transition Center, they have non-congregate units, but it is more of a transitional housing. So it's an 18 to 24 month intervention there. And transitional housing, it's, in my humblest of opinion, it's good for like certain populations, but I don't think it's again, a one size fits all, as our community was originally built on the transitional housing model. Even HUD at some point came down and said, you guys have way too much transitional housing around here. So we started diversifying our interventions, and you know, as such, Monterey County has experienced some pretty decent decreases in the homeless point in time count since 2019. So that diversity, I think, is important. And this project that all of us have worked on, is none of us have anything similar to it that I'm aware of. Do you guys have something like this, Robert?
Well, during the pandemic, Housing Matters, one of our nonprofit providers, purchased some pallet shelters. Not quite the same quality product that we're talking about with this project, and it was done during the pandemic without all the pre-planning. So in some ways similar, and a lot of people who weren't willing to come into congregate shelter were willing to come in and use the pallet shelters because of the privacy. And then just on the question that you asked, Pam, about length of time, I mean, I think Roxanne and I share the hope that people stay the shortest amount of time needed to get into permanent housing. And in our data in Santa Cruz County, there seems to be a sweet spot for shelter stays in the 4 to 6 month range, given the current housing market and quality services, is where we see most people who are going to exit to permanent housing, they exit during that time. And folks who stay longer, that we see a drop off. And then in the data, if people are there shorter, it's usually because there's issues that are coming up and it's not a program that's working for them. So I anticipate we'll be in the 4 to 6 months range. And then I think both of our jurisdictions, we'd love to move faster if we could get more resources and more housing opportunities for folks to transition somewhere permanently and as quickly as possible. I think we should have that goal.
And really, that will depend on how fast we can get some more housing in both of our communities developed and established. One of the more complex subpopulations are those that are undocumented farm workers that live along the Pajaro River. But there's definitely a lot. There is a partnership with a nonprofit. I believe we were looking at Community Action Board to assist with some of those citizenship assistance programs. So we have a lot of hope, and I do believe that we should move faster. But I also don't want to penalize a person who just really has more work to do before they're able to be stable enough to get more housing. So, but yeah, I do. And now that the river again, now that the emergency is starting to move into the long-term recovery stage, there are some assumptions that this project will be able to help some of those folks who were displaced from the emergency as well.
Sorry, can I ask a couple more questions?
Sure.
I'm not totally familiar with the population. Are they living multiple camps living in the riverbed or up sort of like on the levee? Or can you give me a little better geographic idea and an estimated count of that population?
Mark can go on that one.
I don't have a count. partly because it's not part of our typical maintenance program and it does fluctuate quite a bit. But depending on where you are in the river, sometimes they're residing up near the levee, rarely on top of the levee, but sometimes that happens because usually we have vehicles that are going across the levee. So usually they don't set up their tents on the top of the levee because they would have to move them all the time. But sometimes they're on the benches, sometimes they're down in the thicket near the bottom of the river. It just depends. I would say that I think more of them are down closer to the river where there's more shelter and privacy. I think that's something that, is natural for people to seek out, is privacy, and the trees and the shrubs down near the center of the channel and the distance away from other urbanized areas would afford that privacy. So that's, I think, what we tend to see a bit more.
Can you generalize dozens, hundreds? I mean, just a little idea of what we're talking about?
I can tell you that before the flood, the outreach team has identified more than 70 folks between river mile marker 3 to 7. I'm looking at Mark.
Yeah, I think that most of them are tending to be closer to the urbanized areas, but so that would be roughly river mile 3 or 4 or something like that, which is measured from the coast upstream. But they do exist in some other disparate areas of the river system as well.
The outreach team was able to gather a list of over 45 individuals who signed up on an interest list. So they said, if we build this the way that they are asking us to build it, then they will participate in the program. So we do know at minimum, almost 50 individuals are ready to go.
And Jessica, there's a new state data thing that you and I have talked about, the homeless data integration system. And you can look at how many people cross over and touch different systems of care. And between Monterey and Santa Cruz County, it's around 140 to 150 people. Not all of them are along the Pajaro River. But on our application, we estimated over the length of the proposal, we're talking probably around 100 people camp in the region during the 2-year plan we have for the grant.
And as the more serious river restoration work begins, I mean, everyone will have to move who doesn't go into your shelter. That you can't keep, this is not a temporary, like seasonal, they'll have to really get cleared out, it sounds like.
Yeah, that is correct. I think we designed this in a way to, it's just in general, it's a best practice for you to have a location for people to relocate to when you are cleaning up an encampment. So historically, that has not really been the case, or the places that people were offered were well over 10, 15 miles away. So that HDIS system that Robert was talking about also says that about 80% of the population generally doesn't relocate from where they're currently at. So if you have service gaps, service deserts, then in general, you will not see a big change in the the unsheltered population, right? So the most exciting part of this, aside from the fact that we get to help our friends over at PERFMA, is that we're filling a service desert for both of our counties and the city of Watsonville. So this really is going to be what I perceive as a best practice that other communities that share the same problem across the state can look at.
I just want to say Mark has to drop off. And so if you have any questions for Mark, can we squeak those in right now before he leaves?
When does the restoration work start? Does it have a start date?
Which restoration?
I'm sorry, the river, the Pajaro, the big project.
The construction is supposed to start next summer.
So it sounds like the timelines are estimated that this should be up and running before that.
Yeah, that's the goal. And that was one of the reasons why we chose this particular product, is because they said that they can get this done in 4 months, which usually it takes much longer to develop, brick and mortar buildings.
And then Renee also has to drop off. We better get these. We're dropping like flies. If you have questions for Renee also.
I just had a question about the money itself and how it's going to be structured in terms of how much is for construction, how much, I mean, does that 80 million also include services? I mean, what does it include?
Yeah, so the construction itself is about $4 million. It's about half of the budget. And then it includes 2 years of service provision. And the service provision is pretty intense. There's also room in there for incentives and things of that sort.
So I'm sorry, how much is construction going to be?
About $4 million.
And the dignity moves, is that the service provision or is that separate from that?
They're the developer.
What does that mean when you say developer? Like they just get it set up or?
Yeah. So these units that we picked, they're intended for fast construction. So they're prefabricated, they come on, they're very similar to pallet shelters, but these are a higher quality. They have air conditioning and heating, more ventilation, and the highest fire rating that you can get for these types of structures.
And following mostly for Renee, I just wanted to ask.
Sorry, guys.
Bye, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, very much.
Take care, everyone.
For Santa Cruz, the idea of a proposed temporary or long-term shelters is incredibly divisive issue. I have not seen this conversation play out in Watsonville. What sense of reaction do you expect to get?
I think it's going to be a real typical reaction. I mean, just being real candid, we've actually been working to try to set up a conversation for our council and the community, and we were just kind of a timing thing waiting on it. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have the sort of the normal, reactions that occur. I mean, I'm hoping. I don't think there's any great location in any community, man. You just have to work through it. It's clearly a challenge and a problem, and how do we deal with it to try to reflect everybody's concerns, do it the right way, deal with the right management, and maintain the dignity that we need to maintain throughout these sometimes challenging conversations. So I'm expecting we're going to have the full conversation and just kind of work through it.
And we'll be there to support the city of Watsonville and the service providers, and a lot of it is really based on education. People are fearful, we know that, right? But the worst thing we can do is nothing. There's a study that came out a few years ago that said that people who are chronically homeless tend to live on average 25 years shorter than their house counterparts. So we can't do nothing, and that's the thing. And in order for us to be successful at serving this population, we have to do it together.
And I'm going to have to get up, but I think I just want to end by saying, I think the important part, one of the keys here is the fact that you have the 3 jurisdictions and the agency, and we're dealing with some of the challenges that we just dealt with during the flooding, the river project that's going to make this part of our great, part of the country that we live in more livable, better, and it's going to minimize a lot of risk and a lot of concerns that we've had that we just recently experienced. So I think it's looking at the entire ecosystem, not only from infrastructure, environment, but people. And, and I think that's, I don't see any other way of kind of trying to deal with these very difficult issues, is the fact that we have everybody kind of trying to work together. I think is also, going to help ultimately, because educating, like Roxanne said, providing the right resources, and the community seeing that everybody's kind of working together, like with intention. We're just not talking about it, but with intention. I think, at the end of the day, hopefully that helps us alleviate some of the fears and concerns. And we have some recent examples, some of the stuff Salinas is doing, some of the stuff that others we've done in Santa Cruz and others, there's some kind of really good examples. But I guess, Jessica, I'm anticipating the full conversation. So I'm going to have to get off. Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Renee.
Thank you, Renee, very much. So we've still got, we've still got Robert and we've still got Roxanne if there's any questions. And I see Todd from the Pajaronian is just jumping in, and I told him I would send him the link so he could kind of get what we talked about, you know, for the last 40 minutes or so.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, sorry I'm late. I was misinformed about the time it started. So I'll watch the video later, and I'm sure all the questions will be answered.
Do you expect the units to be ADA accessible?
There are a certain percentage that are ADA accessible.
And is it possible this could come to an end after 2 years, after the funding goes away?
The intention was that it would never be temporary. There are many other funding streams that are coming down through the health side that could be very beneficial for both of our communities as well. One of the conversations that one of the projects that I am currently actively looking for is to do a post-hospitalization / recuperative care project for people who are exiting out of the hospital. It'll help the hospital system, it'll help the people recover well. And you know, these conversations are very preliminary on where would it go and what is the interest, but it's possible because the infrastructure will be built.
And just to build on that, Jessica, the conversations we had before submitting the application, we asked ourselves this question many times, and the strategy we developed is, since the program, the navigation center is going to be in Watsonville, that on the Santa Cruz side, we're building up our financial plan so that when the encampment resolution funds disappear, we've built up money to continue the program. The amount of investment of everybody and the resources to get this started is not something we want to see end. So I'm very deeply committed to organizing the conversations over the next couple of years with our healthcare folks and other funders. Roxanne is right, though, that a lot of our resources in the county, as you know from listening to me, are dependent on what the state does with their ongoing funding. So, you know, if in a year or two there's no more of the HHAP or other funding, it's going to be much more challenging to keep this going. But those conversations are looking positive from my perspective, and I expect that the state will be making some longer term commitments to providing this kind of funding. So I'm hopeful, and I don't want to be interviewed by you 2 years from now, Jessica, asking why is it closing? So we're gonna try to prevent that from happening in every way, shape, or form possible.
And I'm sorry, is this going to be, is somebody going to be managing this site? Is it self-managed? Is that figured into that grant funding cost, or what does that look like?
Go ahead,
There definitely will be a service provider that will be operating the program. And the service provider that we are that we have been in conversations with is an organization called Home First. And they are very big in Santa Clara County. And they, you know, we've interviewed lots of organizations during this process, talked to folks, and, you know, again, Housing First is such a huge component. You have to work with an organization that truly believes and lives that philosophy to serve people who have been unhoused in some cases for up to 10 years. So after many conversations with different organizations, we have settled on Home First, and the contract is not, you know, we haven't started contracting or anything, but that is our hopes that we would establish a partnership with them.
Any other questions?
I think
I
I'm
haven't
good.
even told Home First. Now I got to tell them that we got the grant. You just reminded me of something still all over the news.
I've actually got to finish writing this in the next few minutes, so I'm going to jump off. Thank you all very much.
All right.
Thanks, Jessica.
Very
nice to meet you.
meet you.
We'll invite you to the ribbon cutting.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we got to do that. Are there any other questions, Pam? Really, Pam? No questions?
I asked some questions. And
You
Jessica
did.
asked a lot of questions I would have asked. So you know, I actually have to go too. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that you all did this.
Oh, thanks. You know, I know you're watching, so we do it
No,
for you, Pam.
I'm gonna send out the link to I'm gonna send out the link to everyone. I'm also gonna post it on our YouTube page just for reference, so you can get it whichever way you like it.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy weekend. Happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Gosh, thanks guys very much for doing this. I appreciate it.